The next few words out of my mouth are going to leave you in sheer disbelief, but by the end of these 20 seconds, I promise you'll believe me. I found Atlantis. 11 million meters away from the Great Pyramid, and 7 million feet away from Bemidji, at the old mouth of the Mississippi. Now, I know some of you guys are asking, like, how the heck can you possibly know this? How could you know? Wow, would you figure this out? How do you know this is even for real? How do you know this is right? Plato's writings talk about Atlantis, and it is the first and I believe the only origin that we have for these actual stories of Atlantis. So all stories you've ever heard about Atlantis stem from this in some form or another, and most of them are bastardized versions of these. Absolutely wrong. And it's to the point where it's comically wrong that it's very clear everyone who's making these videos about Santorini and the recounted structure, they're intentionally fooling you. So in Plato's writing, he says that it's 10,000 stades long, this river that the Atlanteans built. He says that you might not believe it, but they dug this thing. They made it themselves. He has to report it nonetheless. That he says that it is 10,000 stades long. It's a stade wide, and it's got about, I think it was said about 100 feet deep. That's a pretty big river, and they made it. So, well, first off, you got the 7 million feet to Bemidji, right from that old mouth of the Mississippi. Then you got the rhyme, and 10,000 stades being 6.0709 times 10 to the 6 feet. Do you see this? So it's exactly 7 million feet to Bemidji, right from that old mouth of the Mississippi. And it's exactly 6.0709 times 10 to the 6 feet to the dam. I don't know, there's 2 points that line up on the dot. One according directly to Plato from 2,500 years ago from Solon, who said from Egypt. To the dot, the beginning of that river at a dam. And then exactly 7 million feet to Bemidji, right from that old mouth of the Mississippi. So here's some more proof. We've got 11 million meters from the Great Pyramid to the old mouth of the Mississippi, and then 7 million feet to the old mouth of the Mississippi to Lake Bemidji. And here's the other one. Now, 33.7 million feet from the Great Pyramid to Monk's Mound at Cahokia. On the dot. Well, I'm sorry, it's off by 9 feet. I'm pretty sure I could find somewhere on this mound that's on by 9 feet. And what do you know? The same spot on Monk's Mound to the spot where I'm saying Atlantis is exactly 3,630,000 feet. I wonder what kind of a triangle that makes. I haven't even looked. I haven't even done the math, but I think I can assume. But someone brought up the idea of continental shift. And I thought that was interesting because that actually could give us a timeline of about where it was last being used. And now I think what I looked up, and now I believe anyone can correct me here, but it was about 1 inch per year for continental shift. So if we're looking at, I believe we should go from the top of the center of Monk's Mound. I think that's an appropriate place because I think that's where the chief's quarters are. I believe that top part right there would be the point at which we would want to line from. And if we're at 59 feet away from that, that means if you do the calculations, that comes out to 708 years. Puts them, the last time it was right in line. To be clear, there have been habitations on it since then, but I find that interesting. All right, so I know you're still thinking though, but Charlie, like why would you still measure all the way over there? What makes you think it's in this location? Why wouldn't it be somewhere else? Why isn't it in Santorini or the recounted structure? Well, for one, Plato verbatim says that Atlantis is outside of the Mediterranean, so it's not Santorini. It's outside of the Straits of Heracleon, now known as the Straits of Gibraltar. And he says beyond that is you go across the ocean, or he says it's out in the ocean, or it's on the ocean, or across, it's out there. So we know it's not in northern Africa where the recounted structure is near the Atlas Mountains. One, because the Greeks knew where the Atlas Mountains were. They called them the Atlas Mountains. And two, Plato says it's out the Straits of Gibraltar or Straits of Heracleon across the ocean. He makes a statement at some point too that you will then see the true ocean. Weird, huh? So let's just think about this. If we start from the Mediterranean, go to the Straits of Heracleon or Straits of Gibraltar, and we go out into the ocean, and then let's just go straight. Let's just keep going straight out across the ocean. Exactly where do you hit? I don't think it takes much of a physics degree to work a map to know that if you go out the Straits of Gibraltar and you go across the ocean, you hit North America and South America. I don't know. Occam's razor here, guys. What's the simplest explanation? That. Okay, you do exactly what Plato says. You go across the ocean and you get to... Now, I believe I literally remember hearing Simon Whistler on YouTube. I forget which channel it was of his that it is, where he literally goes, guys, we can't have lost the continent anytime recently. I believe I'm standing on the one that was lost to the Mediterranean for thousands of years, and then Columbus, really Leif Erikson, found North America, and then what do you mean we couldn't have lost continent anytime soon? What? That doesn't track, dude. What do you mean?
However, since there's no landmass just beyond the Strait of Gibraltar the size of Libya and Asia combined, it definitely would have fit.
I'm like starting to lose it here. Like, how are you guys gonna make a debunking video, but you're not even gonna know your actual history of what the Greeks thought the world to be and the size of those areas were? Look at this. If Libya is all of North Africa, the Sahara, it's about the same size as North America. And if Asia is all of the Middle East, that's about the same size of South America. So they didn't know about the Far East. Come on, dude. Like this was like the first thing you should have looked up when you saw that piece of information.
Odds are, if Atlantis existed, it wasn't quite where Plato claimed it was. Also, island of Atlantis, or Atlantis, whatever, it's the size of Asia and Libya. Just throw Libya on there as well, why not? Libya's small compared to Asia. Asia's the big continent.
Funnily, Plato literally says that the oceans were no longer navigable by their time. Interesting how this kind of comes out to being the oceans were no longer navigable. It doesn't say that they didn't know how to navigate the oceans. It says they were no longer navigable. And I'm sitting here saying, with all my other content, talking about how you put vibrations into the ground, you cause culminated other vibrations in other places. You shake things in one place in the earth, or you have multiple places shaking things in a coordinated fashion. All those waves will add up. This is the basis for phased array beam focusing. You shake things on the earth and it creates big waves elsewhere. You cause earthquakes, lightning strikes, tsunamis. Oh, tsunamis. If you can control waves, you can stop anyone who's coming over the ocean with tsunamis. They weren't navigable because the other continent had a weapon to use. And I mean, exactly what did Plato and everyone say happened to Atlantis? It was sunk, or it was flooded, or earthquakes. Come on, like, it's literally this technology. It's literally where he said it was. Come on. I'm not even, it's Occam's razor here, people. Like, when I tell you, and they try and tell you it's Santorini or Atlas Mountains, they're laughing in our faces because they know we haven't read it.
When you saw my video, was that the very first time you had ever seen
anyone who's read that could read anything about Santorini and be like, no, just no, no, just not, no. I'm not even going to entertain it because no. Interesting, huh? It's also not that difficult. Now, you can also sit here and go, but Charles, how would you know that these ancients had this kind of technology? This seems kind of crazy. Well, first off, all of our wave mechanics that goes into the exact calculations for all of this literally was invented by Pythagoras in 500 BC. To our Western history, I'll just go with that because that's what I grew up in. I believe most of you have seen. 500 BC, they had the mathematics, they had the physics, they had the waves, they had the music theory for it. But still, we don't know they had this technology for sure. Now, I'll give you one last thing. We know the ancients had this technology because the Romans had to go out of step when crossing over bridges. Why did they have to do that? Because of resonance. You mean to tell me, I dare any one of you to look me in the eye and tell me that one of those brilliant generals, or whatever they called them in the Roman army, one of those brilliant generals didn't see that happen with one of their soldier marches across a bridge and go right to the Caesar and go, "Sir, do I have a weapon for you?" Their weapon was marching their legions across the earth. The vibrations put into the ground. It's really simple. Like, it's almost becoming comically simple to me that like I've been getting called schizophrenic for even thinking. One, this could even work, let alone the ancients had this stuff. That at least gives me to like 0 AD or a couple hundred BC at least. Especially if we've got 500 BC for Pythagoras. And that's if he didn't get it from somewhere else. Do you guys see? Do you see what I'm saying here? Okay, so upon further looking, I guess there's no proof that the Romans knew about the bridge resonance. But come on, they made the next advancement in bridges for the semicircular. Or were they doing that they needed to make them stronger? Kind of funny, isn't it? Pretty big coincidence. And then all of a sudden their bridges got stronger. I don't know, man. Seems pretty, seems quite the coincidence. Oh, and then, look at this. A couple hundred years later, the engineers had to consult with the devil to build these bridges. You mean they consulted the underworld and the vibrations that go on in the underworld to make sure they built the bridges in the right places so the bridges aren't in like high vibration earth areas because of the marching and even just the city's layout and everything? Oh, what a surprise. Wow, they consulted with the devil. You mean they consulted with the underworld? Got it. All right, I lied. There's one more. And look at this. What did the ancient Aztecs say their mythical homeland was called? Oh, it's Aztlan, as in Atlantis. Oh my God, it's such a similar word. Oh, but that's just a coincidence. You know, these people only speak the Nahuatl language and they throw the Atlatl, their spear thrower thing. Like, their entire language is built around Atl. Like, come on. Like, this is... Like, I thought Americans weren't supposed to know their world history. I thought it was all the Europeans know world history. Don't read the words, hear them. Michigan, Mushikan. And one final send-off. Only big conjecture here is that I think somewhere along the line where Plato wrote the Timaeus and Crates dialogues, who got it from Solon, who got it from some Egyptian priests, somewhere along the line, I think it was supposed to be 9,000 cycles, and it somehow went from being 9,000 solar cycles, should have been 9,000 lunar cycles. Now, if you do 9,000 divided by 12, you get 750 years. Solon was around from 630 to, I think it was 580. And then, so you take 600 BC, subtract 750. What do you get? 1350. Ooh, getting close to the Bronze Age collapse, but let's just say that the change in cycles from lunar to solar happened more recently and not later. Let's go from when Plato had written this. Plato lived from 427 to 3 something. Let's just go from 400 BC. 400 BC minus 750. It's 1150 BC when the Bronze Age collapse happened. So who changed the solar cycles? Because it sounds like if we go by lunar cycles, Plato talks about exactly when the Bronze Age collapse happened, when he talked about all this stuff went down. And if you know anything about the Copper Harbor mines up in our UP part of Michigan, you'll know that there are hundreds of thousands of tons of copper missing from those copper mines. No one can explain where they went. No one knows. But we know they was gone before the Europeans got here. What do you think was going on? The Atlanteans were giving bronze over to the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean was giving gold over to the Aztecs. The Phoenicians were probably the ones carrying it back and forth. That one's a hypothesis. I can't prove that one yet. And surprise, surprise, this works the exact same for all the ages of Adam and his descendants in the Bible. Methuselah, who supposedly lived to 969 years old, if you divide that by 12, would get 80.75 years old. A ripe old age for someone back then, but, you know. Do you see what I'm pointing out here, people? America is Atlantis. The American continents, both. We are Atlantis. Ball's in your court, Milo.
I wrote back and said, oh, holy shit, what the fuck?